You gotta get some plants in your.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's PD Active Virtual Speaker Forum. My name is Todd Morrish, and together with Monique Buffler and Kathy Ball, whom you can't see here right now, we will be your hosts and moderators for the morning. Before we introduce today's speakers, a little bit of administrative housekeeping. PD Active depends on donations to bring programs and events like this to our members free of charge. If you value these sessions, please consider making a contribution on our website. And Monique, if you would be so good as to, there you go, beat me to the punch. Thank you. So check your chat windows, everyone, because that's where we'll be putting information from us to you as attendees. And then if you have questions throughout, feel free to use Zoom's Q&A feature. I already see 2 questions in that panel right now, so keep those coming. We will get to questions and answers at the end of a brief presentation by our speakers in a minute here. Next, we always like to take a moment here to cross-promote PD Active's wonderful programs. PD Active's highly regarded support groups now include one for Spanish speakers specifically. We also offer new in-person classes like Zumba for PD and Brain Fit Cardio with Petra, both of those in person. And there's still Tai Chi and yoga and voice and singing and boxing and dance and pickleball and hiking, and the list goes on. That's just a partial list. If you've tried one or more of these, we ask you to please tag a friend or family member to join you on your next session. And you can check out the calendar link on the pdactive.org website, and we'll paste that URL for our calendar into the Zoom chat tool now. So there it is. In the category of upcoming events, there are 2 to take note of that are coming up soon. One is next Saturday, a week from today. The 7th is a roundtable recap of this year's World Parkinson's Congress from Barcelona from some of our own PD Active members. That will be 10:30 to noon. That will be in person, and it will be at Merrill Gardens here in Rockridge. So keep your eyes open on for our newsletter to show you a registration link for that event. And then on October 15th, which is a Sunday, 2 weeks from tomorrow, the PD Active annual fall gathering in the park will be 1 to 3 p.m. Also in person, of course, and at Live Oak Park in Berkeley. There are other events coming up, but we will save those for a future newsletter. One important note, this webinar, as you probably heard, is being recorded. We hope that's okay, and we will post that recording to our PD Active YouTube channel in the next few days. And that link we can put into the chat window now also. So throughout our presentation this morning, we will present you with a small handful of poll questions, which will pop up on your Zoom screens automatically. Please answer these as quickly as you can so our speakers may respond to them in the flow of their discussion. If you prefer to not answer the questions, then merely close the windows when they pop up, no harm. We will start with one of those right now just to sort of get the ball rolling here. Oops, hang on a second. There's one for you all to answer as I keep reading here. As I mentioned earlier, please use the Zoom's QA feature to send in any questions for our panelists, and we will use the chat tool to get you information. Okay, here we go. Have you ever been frustrated trying to explain your symptoms to your neurologist or your movement disorder specialist, or trying to quantify the degree to which those symptoms have changed since your last visit, or kept a manual log of your approximate exercise history or quality of sleep? Well, at the intersection where DBS and wearable devices meet software and data, there is now a way to get your symptom data, and much more directly to your doctor, and in terms she or he will understand. So please meet Brian Pepin, CEO and founder of Rune Labs in San Francisco, builders of Strive PD app. Before starting Rune Labs in 2018, Brian spent nearly 5 years at the Alphabet/Verily Life Sciences Group, leading teams that built data-driven healthcare products and partnerships. While at Verily, he helped launch Galvani Bioelectronics, a $1 billion joint venture with GlaxoSmithKline, to develop new therapies for immune diseases based on stimulation of peripheral nerves. Wow. Let me end this poll so we can see, so that the gang can see what our audience consists of. There's the shocker, right? Please also welcome Benjamin or Ben Stetcher. After graduating college in Canada, Ben spent most of the next decade living and working in East Asia as an education consultant. At the ripe young age of 29, Ben was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Ben launched himself into learning all he could about PD, enthralled by the rampant pace at which biomedical science has progressed in the 21st century. He now speaks regularly at academic centers and biotech companies around the globe. Learn more about Ben at the blog and website he founded called Tomorrow Edition. And there's a link for that too. Ben joins us today from Toronto, by the way, as chair of the Patient Advisory Board for Rune Labs, providing a fresh user's perspective for this cutting edge technology. Ben's also written a book, by the way, and you'll see that pop up in the latter portion of the presentation. So Brian and Ben, welcome to PDactive's virtual speaker forum series. Thank you very much for loaning us some of your precious weekend family time. We appreciate it very much. Feel free to elaborate on my intro above or just share screens and dive right in. Brian, why don't you take it away from here, and then that'll flow automatically to Ben when you guys are in the deck. You're muted, Brian.
Thank you, Todd, Monique, and thanks everybody for joining. I'm Brian. I'm CEO and founder of Rune Labs, the developers of the Strive PD app that some of you may be familiar with. I'm always excited to talk to patient groups about what we're doing, and I get feedback and share more about how you can get access and get involved. So, and happy to have Ben here today as our like I said, chairman of our patient advisory board. We take a very sort of patient-centric approach to precision medicine and management of Parkinson's. And Ben has assembled an incredible group of patients that we work with on a daily basis to make sure that we're building the best possible, most useful possible experience. So kind of the starting point for what we're doing is that there's so much in Parkinson's disease that's sort of hard to predict around symptoms, around patterns, around predicting, are you do you have the correct sort of medication dose level, number of times per day? Should you be on more advanced therapies? Would you benefit? Kind of that full range of things, some of which are things that you really need to kind of be able to do in partnership with your clinician, but other things which a lot of people just manage on their own. Maybe they take an extra quarter pill here and there if they're feeling off, or they modify their diets around high protein meals or some of these things like that. And the key thing that we want to do is bring actionable data, basically real time, into the mix in a way that is very frictionless and easy for you. So that you can have more context for making these decisions. So what we have in the market is something called Stride PD. So it is the most popular and most downloaded Parkinson's app in the App Store. So if you're an iOS user and you go into the App Store and you type in Parkinson's, we're going to be the first thing that comes up, and we're going to have the most reviews and all that kind of good stuff. And you can use it as just an app on your own, right? So if you have it, especially if you have an Apple Watch, you're going to get Parkinson's symptom data back, like tremor and dyskinesia. We'll also show you mobility metrics in the app and on the web. So things that like step length and walking speed, and showing you how those change over time, and maybe showing you how those are changing relative to maybe new medications that you're on or a new exercise program that you started. And we give you kind of some flexibility in terms of what you're able to see and how you can see those relative to your medication. But the sort of net effect is kind of a personalized experience for you that helps you surface patterns that are relevant, helps you manage those kind of symptoms as with given all the tools that you have at home, and also helps you bring data into the clinic, and your clinician gets to see sort of something like this, basically, when when you go into the clinic, say, okay, when you show your clinician your data, they'll get a link that shows something like this, and so they'll be able to see kind of how you've been doing since the last visit, over the last month, over the last 2 weeks, since med changes, and it's all there, quantified, easy to talk about. You don't have to kind of remember what happened ages ago. And all of this is available to you basically as long as you are wearing the Apple Watch. And that's basically it. Like, so most of this is just collected passively. You do get some added benefit if you're using the app to kind of log and track your medications. So we have, as I kind of mentioned, we have this nice, as long as you're wearing the watch, we automatically can record your tremor and dyskinesia metrics. We also record a bunch of metrics which relate to bradykinesia symptoms you're probably familiar with. So slowness of movement, various kind of gait speed, balance metrics. We also encourage and hopefully make it pretty easy to track, key things that sort of matter to you or that you're maybe introducing into your routine. And by tracking those, what we can do is we can look at those events and, let's say you're tracking, you started yoga, or let's say maybe you're trying to figure out what's causing you to feel really fatigued in the afternoon. So if you mark that fatigue, what we'll do kind of for you and your clinician is we'll say, okay, we're going to take all of those times where you mark fatigue, and we're going to look at how the symptoms looked before that, and look how the symptoms looked after that, and look how that looks around your medication, and hopefully be able to figure out some solutions for you that can you can change and alter to make you feel less fatigued. And we show these different views kind of in the app. We show sort of weekly views that show how your symptoms are trending over time, but you can also look in some more detailed views to see how your symptoms are responding to specific medications or specific doses. And we are, as Ben can attest, constantly adding new features. We get a lot of feedback from folks. Later next year, we'll be releasing a feature I'm really excited about that leverages some of these data sources that we have to actually do symptom prediction. So be able to help you predict where your tremor and dyskinesia symptoms in particular are going an hour in advance. So we're pretty excited about that. And we're testing that with some small groups now. But right now you can still get all this data real time. And again, kind of look to see how that's responding as you go throughout your day, as you exercise, as you take your meds, things like that. This has really been, is actually the core app was designed, the lead designer for the app actually is a person living with Parkinson's disease. Her name is Aura Aslepas. She is a very talented designer and had a really impressive career in the Bay Area doing design for all sorts of organizations. And after getting diagnosed with Parkinson's, decided to kind of change her focus, and we worked with her to design the core experience of this app to really have Parkinson's patients in mind from the bottom up, from how the medication scheduler works around sort of dynamically adjusting for when you take your dopamine dose, to kind of how and which types of influences and symptoms we're encouraging folks and enabling folks to record. So I think that's pretty unique and something we're pretty proud of, and just making the whole thing really low burden. Like, if all you want to do is you want to have your symptom data, just wear an Apple Watch and forget about it. Don't worry about anything else. But there's also a lot of other kind of things you can do in the app, depending on how, if there are specific elements of your care, specific medications, specific patterns that you're interested in diving into. We have a bunch of partnerships on the therapeutic side, and we have some new partnerships, including this one with Rocksteady that we're pretty excited about. So we, in the app, one of the things that you can kind of log easily is a Rocksteady workout, along with kind of the intensity and duration. We are partnering with the Rocksteady coaches. So we were just at their big coach conference in Indianapolis, and we've been training them to look at this data with the boxers and help them use it to kind of optimize their workouts in terms of how many times they're coming per week and intensity level of the workout. And we're also sharing some data back with the Rocksteady organization. Hopefully it's going to allow them to kind of publish and show that In fact, the Rock Steady Boxing workout programs are having a pretty big effect on symptom relief for the folks that are taking that program. So we work really closely with, in the Bay Area, Veronica, who runs the Sutter Street gym. I think we're spinning up some work at the Albany gym as well. So if you're interested in those programs, they're really fun and cool, and happy to connect you with those. Yeah, and like I said, Rocksteady is an example of something that we're able to kind of record, and because we have all this other data that's being generated around it, we can really look to see, okay, day after day, week after week, what do your symptoms look like before a class? What do your symptoms look like after a class? And as you increase the number or intensity of your workouts, how do your overall symptom loads kind of change? And again, so we're working with the Rocksteady coaches to help them look at this data with their boxers and dial in. But this is like a microcosm of also what you might do with your clinician, around a new medication. Maybe you're thinking about going on to an advanced therapy like DBS, and you want to understand, like, am I ready? What might change? That's all the kind of stuff folks use this for. We are working with 150 clinical sites in the US, a lot of them in the Bay Area, with 260 plus clinicians that are sort of trained to see the data, use the platform. Happy to announce that we have just kicked off a very large partnership with Kaiser in the Bay Area. One of the nice things about that partnership with Kaiser is because of the structure of how Kaiser works and our relationship with them, folks that have a Parkinson's diagnosis and are being treated by Kaiser are going to be eligible for basically getting a free Apple Watch device as part of coming on to Strive PD. And that, it's not something we can do for everybody, but in the context of Kaiser, we've kind of worked with Kaiser to create a program where we can get Apple devices to folks who don't have them. So if you are at Kaiser and you're seeing a neurologist or seeing a movement disorder specialist, I definitely encourage you to go to our Strive PD website and register. And I'll give the link to Todd so we can put it in the chat. So we can, if you're interested in that program, so we can connect you. And if you're not a Kaiser member, we do a lot of work at Stanford, UCSF, clinics up and down the Bay Area. So like I said, please, if you're curious at all about what we're doing, reach out to me, reach out to the website, and we would love to hear from you and bring you on board. So with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Ben, or reintroduce Ben. Again, I had met Ben about 3 years ago now, and we've been 2 years ago, feels like 3 years, 2 years ago, and I think we really hit it off in terms of kind of connecting on this idea that the future of Parkinson's care is only going to get better if we really listen to patients and listen both to the words they say and listen to the data that comes out of their clinical visits, and that they can kind of partner with us in generating. And it's been my pleasure to work with him and have him lead the patient voice in our company. So everybody's in for a treat. Ben's got quite a presentation in store.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you to Todd, Monique, and Kathy. Hold up on that picture for 1 second, Brian, if you can.
Okay.
Go back for a minute. Thank you everybody for coming and attending and for listening to what I have to say. Just a few words off the bat is that, one, today's not the best day exactly for me. My symptoms are a little bit worse than they usually are, but I'm going to try my best to make the best out of this regardless. And also I'll be weaving in some of Brian's story as well, and how our stories intersect as we go through this. But I'm going to begin as a lot of good stories do, in a shtetl in Eastern Europe in the 1920s.
So I wanted, real quick before you go, I only see like a part of your slide. I don't know if it's just my screen, but maybe can you make it smaller?
I can see it as normal.
You can.
Yeah.
Maybe in the chat, other people can tell us as well if they're seeing the full thing or just a part of it. What part are you seeing, Monique?
I just see like the top right hand part of the photograph.
Yeah, folks, if you could just lob a quick yes or no into the chat window if you can see the screen properly.
That fix anything, Monique, or is it still the same?
It's still the same, but I don't know. Maybe it's just my screen. Okay, why don't you just continue? I'm sorry.
Hopefully everyone else can see. So the picture in front of you of from Poland in 1929, actually, and that man in the back center is my grandfather. Sitting in front of him is my great grandparents as well. There's a lot of reasons for why I told you this, but the main reason is that well, one, my family's been through a lot. It's taken a lot to get me to where I am today, and it's something I'm very cognizant of as I go forward telling my story. That struggle has been kind of a part of my family's history in a lot of different ways. One way that kind of is emblematic of this is a story that I was told by my that was passed down to me from my grandmother. If you can take out your hand and try and follow along with me as I try and tell you, I'm going to translate in my mind from Polish into English as we go about this. So you make some concentric circles on your hand and say the following words. So, sorry, but it goes like this. So in Poland, a long, long time ago, there was a grandmother making porridge for her children. She had 5 children. She made some for this one, she made some for this one, she made some for this one, and she made some for this one. But the littlest one she forgot about, so he ran away. That's basically the end of the story. The reason why I told that though is because it has a very powerful lesson about survival in it for me. Not only does at time, in order for the family unit to survive, sacrifices need to be made, but the littlest ones have to be able to survive by themselves sometimes. And that's a lesson that I took to heart, and something that's enabled me to really get to where I am today. The lessons of survival and what it takes to survive is something I think is imbued throughout the Parkinson's community as well. It's something that I think a lot of us have personal experience with. You can't get a diagnosis of Parkinson's without going through some dark times, and I've been through a lot of them myself. I'm sure there'll still be some to come. I'm grateful that they're to have found organizations like Strive PD and Brian who have found ways to actually build companies in this weird and crazy world that we live in, or are trying to help individuals like myself. But yeah, next, please, Brian. The next part of my journey actually takes place in Kenya. On the top left is where I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. I think that I was 1 year old in that picture. Almost 30 years later, when I was 29 years old, I came back to Kenya in the bottom right hand picture there on a trip to visit my dad, who's working in Tanzania at the time. A few months after the picture was taken, though, the picture on the bottom right, I would get diagnosed with Parkinson's. Now, obviously, that was a very difficult thing for me to hear. It's a very difficult thing for anybody to hear, really, especially at such a young age. At the time, I just also had some very mild symptoms of tremor and some very mild bradykinesia as well. Now, those symptoms were not very debilitating. I thought naively that if this was Parkinson's, that I could live with it, that it wouldn't really affect my life. So I went back to China, where I was living and working as an education consultant. Hold on 1 second. And and I so as I went back to China, where I was working and living at the time, thinking that naively, like I said, this was nothing, and that I could like power through and live with this disease, and that it wouldn't really affect my life that much. But like I said, that was naive thinking. Over time, things progressed and things got worse, and I got to a point where I was 32 years old, and I realized that China was not a good place for me to live with a disease like this long term. So I came back home, but I was again kind of almost naively, but this time in a good way, naively determined to try and do something about this disease for myself, maybe pave a way for other people to help them as well. So I came back and I started to become a patient advocate. I started to travel the world looking for yeah, looking for different opportunities that I could speak and maybe be heard, maybe have people listen to this story that I've been on ever since. One of the first places was actually down in San Diego, where a woman named Jean, the team at the spun into Aspen Neuroscience, actually took me in and gave me a behind the scenes tour of their lab. For other patients that are looking for ways to maybe emulate some of the things I've done, I would say try and do something similar but you have to be ready to take in a lot of disappointment along the way as well. At the beginning, I would send out like 10 emails for every one I got back. So it took a long time for me to actually build up my name in this field. But eventually I did, and I got to a point where I became somewhat well known in the field. However, my disease was still progressing up until when I was about 37 years old. I decided to get DBS. Yeah, that picture was taken just a few days after I got my implant. So I have that. So I don't know if you can see or want to see, but the scars healed pretty well right now. Now you can select the choices that are in front of you. But the healing process took a lot longer than I was expecting, to be honest. And it's not for everybody as well, as I've learned along the way. There's side effects that nobody was really prepared for, and there were things that happened along the way that no one really warned me about. But I've gone through all of that, and the last 2 years of my life have actually felt somewhat normal as well, quote unquote normal, in that I've been able to kind of live my life again. I've been able to travel almost unencumbered for these last 2 years because of this procedure that I went through. And I've been able to kind of live my life and do the things I wanted to do. Some things that I didn't even know that I wanted to do, but I did them anyway. Some of the things I shouldn't have done, but we don't have to go too far into those unless somebody really wants to. Um, so that's been my experiences with DBS so far. Next, please. In a nutshell, happy to go back over any part of this if anybody wants later on. Now, along the way, I've realized that medical science, though, has a lot of problems with it. I think I've gotten a pretty good grasp of some of the bleeding edge of medical science because I went out into the world and I asked all the experts that would let me in if to let like I've knocked on doors and I've been able to ask all of them really if about leading edge of science. And I've learned that a lot of science is not exactly what we think it might be, it's not that it's that a lot of them they have patients in their minds, but they don't have patients in front of them. They don't have patients that they're dealing with every day. And that's something that I've found has been very important for a lot of anyone in the field, anybody who's studying Parkinson's, anybody who thinks that who calls himself a so-called Parkinson's expert. If you're not dealing with it every day, if you're not in the clinics, or if you're not at least in some ways like interacting with the data coming directly from patients as well, if you then you're only getting a small glimpse into what Parkinson's really is. There's so many different aspects of having this disease that are just hard to quantify and hard to describe, that unless you're really dealing with it every day, unless you're focused on it. And that's why again that I have so much respect for what Brian has done, because I speak to Brian almost every day, or at least I send him messages almost every day now. And I know how much he cares for and he tries to get in touch with more people that live with this disease, because he generally does want to help people. And that's something that I found very few people really want to do. A lot of scientists, they prefer to look at their lab and their cells in a dish, or mice in their cages. And dealing with real people, it's hard too. It's not easy. I mean, people with Parkinson's, we're not the easiest crowd to please either. But I think it's vital if you're actually going to make progress in a field as convoluted as this field that we are in. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the biggest, though, is on the next slide as well. And that's that so people get treated, we're obviously individuals, but yet we all get lumped under this one disease label called Parkinson's. But Parkinson's doesn't really exist. Parkinson's is this kind of like this artificial clinical label that clinicians use to describe this whole population of people. But we're individuals at the end of the day. And as that quote from my own book says, um, almost everything we know about this disease comes from studies into groups of people. Those people get plotted as dots on a graph. A line then gets drawn through the middle of the group, reflecting the group's average. That average becomes a result of the study. An average almost none of the dots falls on. So I think that's something that's important to take to heart if you're actually going to actually try and help people. You have to remember that we're individuals that are dealing with this horrible condition, that and we're just trying to make the best of it, really. It's another way of just access to care is a huge issue I think that a lot of people face. I know here in Canada, most patients get about 20 or 30 minutes every 6 months with their neurologist. That's if they actually get to see a neurologist. Most patients with Parkinson's, most people living with Parkinson's don't actually get to see a movement disorder specialist, let alone get the kind of anything close to the kind of care that I've received here in Toronto, where I get access to some of the best teams in the world. And this is something that is wonderfully depicted by in this image from Sarah Reguer, who's a good friend of mine, and it speaks for itself. So I'm just going to stop talking and let you guys take that in for a few seconds there. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is DBS? What is deep brain stimulation therapy? Now, there's a lot of ways that it can be described. There's a lot of things that could be said about it. But for me, it's really been this next picture. It's allowed me to play again. So these past 2 years, like I said, have been very freeing for me, freeing from Parkinson's and freeing for my life, really. So you'll see in front of you my niece and my nephew, Henry and Carrie. And this is really what Parkinson's has enabled me to do again. It's enabled me to play. It's enabled me to be free of this disease, even for brief moments of the day. I feel as though like it's really given me the ability to to play again with them in particular. I mean, however, so there's like a honeymoon period as well that comes with when you start levodopa and when you start Parkinson's, and I'm kind of at the tail end of that honeymoon right now. Very cognizant of that fact because Henry, who's the little boy in the picture that you see in front of you, I think he's about 5 years old in that pic. So he's about 5 or 6 in that picture. He's now 7 years old. And the other day we were playing baseball here close to my house, and he noticed that I was kind of like walking funny and that I fell once on the field as well. And he kind of like laughed it off, but he was like a little bit concerned as well. Now we haven't had that conversation yet with him, but I feel like we're gonna have to have it soon because it's you can't hide this thing forever. But it's a difficult thing that I'm not exactly sure how to do yet. Although with my doctors as well, we're thinking about new ways to actually try and engage with people like this as well, and how to explain it to young kids like that. And I'd love to hear if anyone has any good anecdotes or stories as well. I know that there's one person actually here in Toronto. Her name is Dr. Sonia Mather. She wrote a whole book on how to talk about Parkinson's with kids like this. However, DBS is a whole other issue of this, and it's not something that's easy to explain, but I'll find a way eventually, one way or another. Next, please. Programming session. So, programming sessions are one of the weirdest experiences that I've ever had in my life. Also, it's an experience like nothing else. Like, there's nothing else quite like the feeling of when you're sitting in your neurologist's office and he has the iPad or his tablet in his hand, and at the click of a few buttons, you're instantly feeling so much different than you did before you did that action. There's nothing else in the human experience that's quite like being programmed. And this is actually just a quick quote. I'm not going to read it, but you can read it if you want, from my uncle, who came to Toronto to witness one of the programming sessions for himself. And this quote is also in my new book as well. Um, I'll get to that towards the end of this little talk that I'm giving. But just it shows, if you want to read it, that it gives a glimpse into the third person perspective of what programming sessions are like. But I'm still struggling to find ways to actually explain it from the first person, to be honest. I tried to in the new book that I wrote with my own doctor, Dr. Fasano, though I'm sure I fell short at times as well. Because, like I said, there's nothing else in the human experience to really compare it to. Um, but I did my best in that book. But yeah, next. So the future of DBS and the future of care, I think, looks something like this. So in the past, DBS was really just like a blunt uh, electrode it's almost like a straw. So if like two straws, 6 inches to both hemispheres of my brain. At the ends of it, there are four electrodes on each side. For me, it's the two middle ones that are lit up, but each person kind of has their own unique thing. In the future, though, there's a lot of companies now that are growing. Like this is a growing field of work as well, and there's a lot of companies that I'm sure Rune Labs is engaging with as well. They're trying to build something where it'll look and act much more like a natural neuron would, where it'll sit atop. So let's say this is your target area of your brain. The electrode will come in and it'll be placed right at the top of top of that part. Then you have little tiny micro robots or nano robots as they're called. That might come in, pull out each of those threads, and innervate the target area in a much more precise way than the current uh, electrodes can. The current ones are really like this blunt instrument that we use that isn't very precise either. When you're talking about the brain and you're talking about the neurons in the brain in particular, the more precision that we can actually deliver, the better I think we'll all be. So I think that's the future that we're gearing towards, but we're not quite there yet. Hopefully, the next 10 to 20 years, though, we'll see significant improvements in that area. Now, how does this all tie back to Strive PD and to Rune Labs? Well, like Brian was mentioning, 2 years ago, I reached out to Brian and I just kind of was inquisitive about this new company that he had recently formed, I think 2 years prior to that, around how to actually help people with Parkinson's. I reached out to him, and he had enough intuition and insight into what I was doing to invite me down to San Francisco and take a look for myself at all that this team was building behind the scenes. And I remember like that first tour 2 years ago, getting like a preview into this world that you're seeing in front of you right now, where so the readout that you're seeing on the left hand side of the screen is almost a live readout from how I feel that the Apple Watch is picking up on. So signs of tremor and dyskinesia. These are all FDA approved measures that enable us now to do with one thing that I think any patient who you talk to for enough time will tell you that they're very annoyed with, and that's the UPDRS test. It's an outdated test that tries to convey in some crude ways how clinicians view our experience of Parkinson's. I find this to be a much more accurate description of what I'm experiencing on a day-to-day basis, simply because when I go to my clinic, it's a very artificial environment, and it's only a snapshot in time. This finally enables clinicians, and any clinician in the world can then have this video into how my days have been. They can monitor me also from almost anywhere in the world. And it's really a huge step forward, in my opinion, anyway, that I think should revolutionize how individuals get treated and how clinical trials in particular are run. Um, but yeah, I don't know if Brian wants to add anything on top of that, but I think that's about it for. Oh, no, there's one more slide, I believe. So self promotion is my new. So my old book was called Brain Fables. I wrote that with Alberto Espe. He's in Cincinnati. I love Alberto to death, and me and him together, we spent a lot of time crafting this book called Brain Fables. That was released and available wherever books are sold now. I think we released it 3 years ago. My new book called Reprogramming My Brain, not the brain, but Reprogramming My Brain, a guide to the future of the brain and neuromodulation by a patient and his doctor. So something I just finished writing with with Alfonso Vazano, who's my doctor here in Toronto. It's going to be available this December 15th, I believe. I'm very much looking forward to getting this out into the world and hearing how it reflects other people's experiences as well. It's not just my own story; it's a story that we kind of pulled together from a lot of patients. There's a lot of personal anecdotes in there for myself and for people that I know living with Parkinson's. Um, so with that, I'll say thank you to Todd and Monique and Kathy once again. And me and Brian are here now. We're happy to take whatever questions you might have. And yeah, if there's anything we didn't cover, feel free to mention it now. Yeah, thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Brian. Two very cool perspectives. We'll start to plow through some of the questions in a second here. Monique will help me. We've got several already queued up in the Q&A tool. Again, folks, as attendees, if you've got questions for Ben and his journey, or Brian and the app specifically, please put those into the Q&A feature in Zoom, which you'll find if you mouse over the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a tool tray down there, and you can pop up the Q&A feature. Before we dive into questions, I'll just give a quick full disclosure. I joined up with the Strive PD program a couple months ago myself. And as a past software product guy, I was keen on how the data was being collected, where it was coming from, how it was getting into the app, and how it was getting delivered to my doctor. So I've been studying that, and Brian, you glossed over it a little bit, but some of this data that's being layered in the Insights feature, in the Insights page of the Strive PD app, is coming from self-programmed info. So if I go into my Strive PD app, I can put in all of my medication regimen. Some of it's coming from the Apple Watch that I have in my hand right now, specifically what am I trying to say? My tremor. And I don't suffer from dyskinesia yet, but that would be coming through the Apple Watch also, and then also through a DBS system. So you can use, Brian, you can use Strive PD without having had DBS. Is an important qualifier to throw out first, correct?
Yeah, we have about 5,000 patients that are using Strive PD, and I think about 700 or 800 of them have deep brain stimulation. And we have some specific kind of workflows that support, especially around your initial programming session, but also kind of ongoing optimization along with meds, support DBS. But we you know, a lot of the people that are using it just to kind of figure out their levodopa dosing and titration, or again, kind of figure out patterns around exercise or meals, or maybe, you know, have a more targeted conversation with their doctor of maybe they should be on extended release drugs. Maybe they're, you know, candidate for amantadine. Maybe they're a candidate for, you know, other range of advanced therapies. So, you know, I think our goal is to, for folks that are using Strive PD, to have sort of the tools in hand to really get the best possible care for them as quickly as possible, and then keep that level of optimization over time. Yeah.
So the data that's coming from the DBS, and I guess your first partnership and integration was with Medtronic's the Percept app. That's why we threw up a poll question. You saw from the poll question that over half of our attendees today have had DBS or are planning on it, and some of them are on the Percept device. The Percept device is what you're on, right, Ben? And that's got what we call adaptive, or as the Stanford group calls the closed loop model, which means that you're not only supplying stimulation to the brain to create more dopamine, but the probes are also collecting data and sort of feeding that back to the transmitter and other apps like Strive PD. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So again, you don't have to have had DBS to make good use out of the Strive PD system. But the layering of the data from the watch, from the DBS, from my own programming into my Strive PD app, have got me really excited for my next appointment with my neurologist, which will be coming up here in October. I actually emailed him. I'm on Kaiser, so I emailed him through the Kaiser platform and just gave him a heads up that I'm, you know, when I schedule this next appointment, I'm going to be wanting to talk a lot about Strive PD, and I want to see you looking at the insights that all these data sources are providing. I'm so psyched that I don't have to track this. I mean, look at my tremors. I can't track this stuff manually, so I'm very psyched that some of this is being tracked automatically, and he's going to see my insights page and layer upon layer of data. It's going to help him give me better treatment. So I'll report back later, but let's move on.
Excellent.
To some questions.
Yes, because some of these questions, so yeah, these are some good like softball questions. So the Rune and Rune Labs. So I'm a big Scrabble fan, and at some point in time, like when I was starting the company and hadn't named it yet, I was playing around of Scrabble and came across Neuro. I had letters Neuro, and I just saw that Rune was like a partial anagram for Neuro. And then I liked the idea of like runes and being like puzzles, you know, like language, you know, kind of puzzles, and the brain obviously being like the biggest puzzle of all. And then, of course, Rune being a 4-letter word, the domain name was already taken. So hence we are Rune Labs. Yeah, that's that. Stripe PD, it's not that it doesn't work with other fitness watches. It's just we can't get the FDA cleared tremor and dyskinesia data off of other fitness watches. So you know, that's something that was specifically approved to work with the Apple Watch, and that's kind of just how the regulatory approvals work. So if you can use Stripe PD, you know, with another fitness watch, and you can still record your exercise and things like that, but you won't get the some of those nice charts that we were showing that show the continuous tremor and dyskinesia data over time. In terms of logging your mood, yep. And if mood is definitely something you're trying to kind of work on or optimize around meds and side effects, would definitely encourage you to log that, because then we can surface patterns around symptoms in your mood to you and your clinician, and hopefully make again, kind of shorten the path to getting that treated and getting that optimized for. We have, let's see, John Dean. Hey, John, is talking about Sonia Mather's book. He recommends another book, Rashida Ali's book, I'll Hold Your Hand So You Won't Fall.
Thanks, John.
And then,
yeah, and I actually I know of another book that might be coming out pretty soon as well. Although I can't say too much about it right now, but yeah, thanks, John. That I haven't heard of Rashida Ali's book before. I know who she is, but I haven't heard of that one before. But thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, so we had a question
Um,
about one of the slides that I showed. This one, Ben's data. So there are a few different views here, and I'll just kind of describe them, and I'll let Ben maybe talk about what he remembers from his experience. But these first two views are available in the app. So this is like this kind of nice smooth chart here is like the sort of default chart, and it shows sort of your average tremor and dyskinesia levels day by day. It also, these rings here basically indicate in order to give you a sort of a high confidence reading, we sort of recommend that you wear the watch for at least 6 hours a day. And so these rings basically indicate they close if you wear it for 6 hours. And so that we can kind of give you a high confidence estimation of tremor and dyskinesia. And I assume that Ben was like halfway through his Sunday when he took the screenshot. So he's working on that. So Ben's wearing it an average of nine and a half hours a day. This is if you were to click on this picture in the app, it would take you to this screen, and you can select whether you want to look at a day of data, a week of data, 2 weeks of data, a month of data, 3 months of data. So right here, Ben's looking at a month of data from June 12th to June 11th. And you can see how his tremor in particular is fluctuating kind of, day by day. And I think, it looks like around so towards the end of July or the beginning of July, he had a nice kind of roll off in symptoms here. And I think that may have something to do with a lot of exercise that he got at the World Parkinson's Congress, but I can let him explain. This view up here is actually a view that we share. This is just like a really under the hood view that sort of our data scientists see and researchers have access to. So just to kind of show that, we can kind of decide and look at this data. There's a bunch of data that are underlying kind of algorithms essentially, and the algorithms are what kind of surface these kind of nice, clean, interpretable signals. But there's just a lot going on under the hood. And so this is just like a clipped shot of 9 hours of this like super hyper detailed data. I don't know, Ben, did you want to add any
only
color
9
there?
hours for. Sorry, go ahead.
That's just for the research data. It's just a 9 hour shot here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The reason why is also because like I can't really wear it to bed. I can't sleep with anything on my wrist. So that's why there's an average of 9 hours per day, just because like at nighttime I don't really wear it at all. During the day is about 12 hours per day that would be actually wear the watch. And I found that was enough time to actually report an accurate day as well. And the reason why like everything dropped off towards right before June was not only because of the World Parkinson's Congress. So I did a lot of walking, but right before the World Parkinson's Congress, I actually had another programming session with my neurologist. And that's a really like beautiful thing about this program, this Stride PD, is you can see like almost to the minute when you make an adjustment to your medication or your therapy. You can see like the effect, whether or not it's positive or negative. That's not self-determined, but for me that change was very positive. That's why I kept it for so long afterwards. And it lasted until like a week ago, really, the change that we made at that point. Yeah, that's why.
So going back to that slide, can you keep that up again? Sorry.
Sure.
So those changes, and whether they're sort of spikes or sustained changes, are sort of like the key data information, I guess, that you would get from this. But is it overlapped with the other data somewhere that would tell you why? For example, you happen to know that you had DBS, or that you were walking more, but it could have been medication changes. So where do you integrate all those factors and get the
Let me pull something up that's different. I'll show you. One moment. Just give me a second.
I do like, Brian, the data visualization that you guys have come up with. So kudos to your designer. But Kevin's got a funny comment in connection with a question about how he feels like sometimes he needs an advanced degree in data science to be able to interpret some of this stuff. But my experience with the app has been that the data is presented really well for either somebody who does or doesn't have any, advanced knowledge of data analysis and the like.
Yeah, and I can maybe share some examples later, but one of the things that we're doing more of now is you're getting, in addition to what you see in the app, you're getting sort of a monthly rolled up insights report, which kind of connects the dots and says, like, it's this particular time of day, this particular medication, this particular pattern, and then generates some charts that are specific around that to show, to you, and show, that you may choose to share with your clinician or your physiotherapist or whoever. So.
But the
And
data
then-
will be probably as good as the data that you're putting in, right? The output and the insights are going to be as good as what you're putting in
Yeah,
regards
I think,
to-
like I said, mostly, fortunately, the way that the system was designed to work, you get most of the actionable information from wearing the watch, and if you're using the app as your primary kind of medication scheduler tool, then we can connect all that symptom data back to medication. So if the thing that you're trying to do is figure out, hey, like, are my doses right? Should I be on 4 times a day versus 3 times a day? Or, is there a particular medication that I'm on that's maybe causing problems, or, that should change? Or, if those are the kind of questions that you have, I would really encourage you, when you're using the app, to use it as your medication scheduler, because then we'll be able to connect those dots for you. If you're interested in other sorts of patterns, again, around exercise, food, like those are the things that I would encourage logging, because that's how we connect the patterns on the other side.
And just to finish with Kevin's question, since he had a funny point there, how is the Apple Watch able to measure duration and intensity of symptoms like dyskinesia?
Yeah, the sort of short answer is AI. I know that might seem kind of funny, but this was a really, really cool use of modern, what's called machine learning technology. So basically, there's a really nice scientific paper about it that was published maybe 3 years ago, kind of showing what went into it. But they took about 400 folks and did a lot of video analysis, did a lot of multi-clinician rating, and basically had them wearing an Apple Watch and had them being constantly rated for their tremor and dyskinesia scores. And then they fed those labels into this AI tool, this machine learning algorithm, and that extracted all of the core patterns. And then that's actually what's running on the watch, is that classifier. So it's based on kind of that methodology, and that, using that kind of technique and using that data set, that was kind of how we in Apple were able to create what is by far the most sensitive and specific kind of classifier for tremor and dyskinesia that's out there. And also, it operates super efficiently, so you can see the data in real time. It doesn't have to go to some other place to be analyzed and then come back. You just kind of get it generated on the watch and you can see it.
And tell us about future release plans. Do you have plans for integrating exercise data and sleep quality soon?
Yeah.
Or
So sleep is in there. So if you wear to sleep, you'll get the Apple sleep staging data, and that will again bring that together with your symptoms and things like that. We're just launching next week. I would say upgrade to the app, which basically more closely integrates all of Apple's existing exercise stuff with what is in the app. So if you're using your Apple Watch, sometimes, like, if you're running or whatever, it'll say, "Are you running?" And you can say, "Yes, I am running." And now if you do that and you capture it that way, it'll also appear in Stripe PD. And so you don't have to like double log or things like that. Like I said, some of the 2 things that we're probably most excited about that are relevant for this group. One, like I said, we're launching this big partnership with Kaiser, and the goal in the partnership with Kaiser is really to see to kind of push Strive PD further and see what we can do to reduce unplanned hospital visits for people with Parkinson's. And it's one of those things where Kaiser really doesn't like unplanned hospital visits because they're really expensive, and patients obviously really don't like unplanned hospital visits because they are horrible. And so everybody is should be motivated to kind of avoid these things. And what our goal is to kind of do 2 things. One is to provide Stripe PD plus some additional kind of coaching features, tools that will be wrapping around it to Kaiser healthcare recipients who have Parkinson's to help them avoid severe symptoms and manage those types of things between clinical visits. But we'll also be within Kaiser helping to flag folks who are having a lot of uncontrolled symptoms outside of clinical visits and make sure that they are getting the attention of the movement disorder specialists and that they are getting seen and getting access to, changes in therapy, advanced therapies, things that are going to hopefully reduce the likelihood of falls and orthostatic hypotension events and some of these things which lead to bad outcomes. So it's the first time we've done something like this big. So Kaiser's huge, right? Yeah, so we're excited about that. And then, like I said, we're testing right now something that we developed over the summer, which is a couple more kind of AI algorithms which actually predict these tremor and dyskinesia symptoms about an hour in advance. Basically predict if they're going to go more severe or less severe or be stable. And we're building kind of a tool around that, which will effectively give folks alerts if they're likely to kind of be in a severe symptom category, dyskinesia or tremor, and hopefully give those alerts in a way where people can make really well-informed decisions about, do I take that extra quarter pill? Do I delay this dose? Do I maybe change how I'm thinking about this next meal, or maybe if I can see that I'm going to have a severe off period in an hour, maybe I don't plan to be like driving. Kind of the full range of things there. So I don't know if people are familiar with like continuous glucose monitors and how diabetics use those, but that's kind of our mental model is to make Stride PD and including an Apple Watch basically work like a continuous glucose monitor does for type 1 diabetics in terms of giving you more ability to make those types of decisions around meds. So we're testing that. We'll be running clinical trial for that probably early next year that hopefully folks are going to be welcome to enroll in. Any Stride PD user will be welcome to enroll in. Yeah, so that'll be something to look out for.
Let's field this question by Heather, Brian. She basically asks, if my doctor's not signed up, how do I get them signed up?
Yeah, so I will demonstrate very quickly how to do that. So if you go to our website, strive.group, the Strive PD website, and you click register here, you can fill out this form, and in particular, you can fill out the name of the neurologist or movement disorder specialist or physical therapist that you would like to be on the app. And we will, if they are not already in our network, we will contact them and train them and bring them in to the network. And we've never failed to do that yet. So it's a process that does work pretty well. Yeah, I tried to click through the form without filling everything out, but yeah, so just go to this register here tab, and when you fill out the form, let us know the name of the clinician that you would like to make sure can access this data, and we will take care of the rest behind the scenes.
And sorry, Monique, let me throw in one more on the same line of questioning. Is there a way for me? Well, I think I'm pretty connected with my doctor. I'll know in October, but if I weren't, could I print out any PDFs and take them to the doc and show them,
Yeah, so you'll get, before your visit, you'll get a PDF that rolls everything up that is tailored to you, custom to you, that you can print, that you can share, you can email, you can do whatever you want with.
Are we going to save money?
Well, so just follow up on that. The patient can generate that from the website themselves, or does the doctor generate that? And how do you know whether the doctor?
Yeah, so the patients are in control, basically, is always the kind of short answer. So if you can you can log into your app and generate it within the app. And there's basically there's like an insights tab in the app that is after kind of the My Day tab, and you can just push share and you can generate a PDF here and you can kind of trigger that. You'll also get one sort of automatically for your clinical visit. And your clinician will be receiving notifications as well that the data is available to look at. And some folks look at it before the clinical visit. Some folks will pop it up and look at with you during the clinical visit. We're having an increasing number of doctors that are looking at things actually after the visit. So they might make a medication change and then check in to say, hey, did this change like reduce your tremor in the evening like we thought it might, and they'll check on that too. Yeah.
Ben.
Brings me to a question that Todd asked at the beginning, actually. What if you're in a part of the world that doesn't really, that isn't the US really, that doesn't have Strive yet? What can you
Yeah.
do
So
then?
if you're OUS, I'd be surprised if you were on this call, I guess, first of all, but if you are, you can still download and use the app on your own. It's just, there's a lot of work that we've had to do to in a regulatory compliant way, be able to share data with clinicians in the US. And that process is a little bit different in every country around the world. So the next country that we're really trying to gear up to be in is Canada, because it's actually pretty similar to the US. And Ben keeps on bothering me about it. So yeah, but no, so yeah, I guess look out for that.
That was a question that came in by email pre-event here today. So good follow-up, Ben. So you're in Toronto right now, which I understand is part of Canada still, right?
Yes, it is.
So you're using Strive PD, and you have a doctor there that's seeing your data, or not yet?
Well, I show them everything manually on the app when I go and when I go to my visits. So that's why we're using it right now. We're hoping soon that once those regulatory hurdles are crossed, then it'll just be like I'm in the States. So it'll be similar to the experience that Brian shared before.
Good. That answers that.
Heather Kennedy asked a question about sort of, what if maybe I'm unfamiliar with the technology? I'll just share this one more time. So we have some really great patient coaches that all have care backgrounds that will help onboard folks and provide support. And so, as you're registering, or if you're registering for, a care partner or something like that, just in this, is there anything else you want us to know before contacting you? Feel free to say, hey, like I've never used an Apple Watch before, or maybe, I want more of a technology demo. If you just type that in here, then when you kind of get, you get like an onboarding appointment with one of our patient coaches, and they'll make sure to like cover all of the sort of basic details of everything from like how to log in, and if you need to recover your password to how to use the app and log and things like that.
Good. Let's see. I'll lob you a question from Herb here. He's got a point he's making that it seems like it would be helpful if lots of people were wearing the app, and probably meaning the watch as well, for as many hours as possible. Here's a first question that comes to my mind stemming from that. Are you aggregating data anonymously on your end to?
Yeah, and that's very transparent. So when you sign up for the app, we request from you that we're able to use your data kind of anonymously to build our kind of internal models. And like, I think the first really cool thing that we've been able to do with that is this symptom prediction algorithm. So the reason we're able to have that is because we have all this historical data that we could train that model on. But like, and that's something that hopefully we can launch and is going to have a super positive impact for folks. And yeah, I think there's a lot of other stuff that we're working on in terms of kind of automatically matching people to certain therapies. And that is going to also require, some knowledge of this data. But yeah, so that, I guess, and we're very transparent about that when we use it, but our goal is to continue to improve the sort of predictive capacity around what we're doing. And yeah, definitely the more people that are engaging with the app and using it and consenting to let us use some of that data, the more powerful tools that I think we'll be able to build.
Great. Ben.
Can I ask Brian really quickly? What do you think have been some of the most surprising lessons that you've learned about Parkinson's just by being able to have being able to study all this data coming directly from people with Parkinson's? Is there anything that you think has been particularly shocking for you? And then what do you think other clinicians might be most shocked to learn about? Or other people in the field, maybe, or researchers in the field might be most shocked to learn if they had access to all the data that you have access to.
I think this might get a little bit wonky, but I think one of the things that we have been able to study that I don't think anybody else has really been able to study is looking at, so you know, most of you probably wake up and you take your first levodopa dose in the morning. And what we've been able to do is look at the sort of symptom period that follows that and look to see the kind of dynamic response of how those symptoms are kind of rolling on or rolling off following that first dose. And what we found is there are some sort of metrics there in that dynamic response that seem to be really tightly correlated with things like time from diagnosis, time from first symptom, kind of clinician scored overall like disease severity. So basically, it seems like we can kind of use that response maybe to quantify how people's brains are responding to dopamine, which is really like core to the kind of the Parkinson's pathology. And that could be a really powerful way to tell whether new therapies, disease modifying therapies are working. So it's like something that the partners that we're supporting, like Blue Rock and Aspen, who are developing stem cell therapies, are very interested in as a way to measure, you know, is this therapy working? Are people responding to it? But it's also something, again, that we can generate pretty passively. And I think we're thinking about how we can make that relevant in the context of care as well. I think that's pretty interesting. I think the other kind of thing is, you know, I maybe when I started the company, I had a more kind of like, I was like, okay, we have all these different stakeholders. We have clinicians, we have patients, we have payers, and we kind of have to like, as the initial approach is kind of keep it balanced, like kind of treat them all equally. And I think what I've found and what we found as a company is there's just so much we can move so much faster, and I think do so much more by really keeping patients as our core stakeholder. And so that's really how everything was designed. Like everything kind of flows through the patient. We partner really closely with folks around whether it's enrolling in a trial or kind of getting some of these care workflows done. Basically, like I think because resident, but like the patient, you guys have the most at stake, right? Like that. So no one knows more about your disease or has more at stake than you. And so, you know, and like there was that picture that Ben showed from Sarah that has like, okay, I see my doctor for an hour a year, everything else is mine. So yeah, I think we you know, doctors and clinicians are an important stakeholder for us, and we try to make it easy and train them to interpret this data and help you. But I think our position is more about like empowering folks with you know, FDA cleared, validated data to you know, go to the clinician, and if their clinician isn't willing to have that conversation, help them find a clinician who is, frankly, you know.
Ben, I would be interested in hearing your answer to that question. You know, based on your experience with Strive PD, what has been the most sort of you know, significant insight that you've had, you know, with your looking at your data?
One thing that's kind of shocked me, it's not exactly directly about my data, but is the response of the field kind of to what we're trying to do, what Strive PD is and what Rune Labs has been trying to do. Because I found that the field is a bit more, I'm going to put it nicely, but the, it's a slowly moving field that's kind of been built up over the generations that have come before us. And getting and making things change as quickly as patients want them to is a very difficult thing to do. Like we would love this to replace the UPRS tomorrow, but that's not going to happen just because of how the regulatory bodies work and how this field and the pace at which this field actually progresses. It's much slower than I think a lot of patients would like. I feel like a lot more patients could be helped out a lot quicker though, if some of those people who ran the field and some of the individuals who have so much control and power over this field, if they were more aligned with the needs of patients, I feel like things would happen much quicker than they currently are. I don't know, Brian, what's the name? Say any anecdotes or name any names, but yeah, it's very challenging just to have that realization as well as a patient in particular because there's so many times I've been so frustrated just by the pace of progress that it's hard to hold back sometimes as well. But you know, you because one of the things very challenging about being a patient is you have so many people. Well, you are like suffering. You have so many like other people that you're trying to please. Like you don't want to piss off your doctors too much. You don't want to become a nuisance to the people around you, your family, your friends, and your doctors. It's a tricky balance. It's a difficult thing for us to actually have to take on our shoulders, but it's part of the reality of being a human being. You know, patients, we'd like to be selfish, I think. We'd like to be more selfish than we are. I think there's also a need for us to be selfish because that's the only way that you're really going to get the kind of care that you need is if you push the levers as far as they can be pushed. But you have to be able to do it in a way that doesn't actually like alienate you as well. So it's I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but that's kind of where my head went when you asked that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like one sort of takeaway from that is, if you're using this app, is to sort of really push your own doctors and your clinicians to sort of collaborate with you, and look at the data and use the data, and just sort of like to advance that sort of personalized medicine approach, the patient-centered personalized medicine approach.
Yeah, but you have to be wary as well because if you're at a center that, for lack of a better term, is kind of more stuck in the past, or it's run by people that aren't willing to use these new technologies, then it's a very difficult thing. It's an incredibly difficult situation to be in as a patient because you don't want to piss people off. You don't want to like alienate yourself, like I was saying before. But you need them to realize that this is the best way for you to actually get cared for properly.
Hmm.
So it's a difficult line to skirt. I'm
Yeah.
happy
I
that
mean,
I'm in Toronto, where like a lot of the clinicians and the researchers here, they're very willing to see these new technologies and they see the benefit that can be had. But I've come to know like a lot of centers where that's not the case, and I feel kind of bad for all the patients that are falling, that are kind of left behind because they're at a center. They're just where they live doesn't give them the ability to really keep up with the times.
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, there's a few kind of questions in the chat about, how can I get my provider to use this? I think we're happy to be your partners in that. And the Bay Area has, I think, one of the highest concentrations in the world of like top quality Parkinson's doctors. So there is absolutely no reason, if you're living in the Bay Area, that you shouldn't be getting access to the top quality care. So when you register for Stride PD, you will get paired with a patient coach on our team, who will be very open to having that conversation with you. And like I said, if your clinician is not a Stride PD user, we will recruit them to be one, and we have a very high success rate of that, especially in the Bay Area again, where I think folks tend to be a little bit more progressive and open to technology and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, and feel free, anybody on the call here can feel free to email me as well. I'm Brian, Brian at runelabs.io. And I can make sure that we follow up on those types of questions. Herb asked a question of how do we make money. This is always like a big question in healthcare. How do you make money? So we have three ways. One is through relationships with folks like Kaiser, right? So Kaiser is a managed care organization. They accept bulk payments from Medicaid, tens of thousands of dollars per year, kind of per patient. And then they have to use that to, that's all they get from Medicaid. And then they have to use that to kind of deliver care to their patients. And so for Kaiser, again, like one of the things that really kind of breaks their budget is people having unplanned hospital visits. And so they're paying us to work with their Parkinson's population to try and reduce the number of unpaid hospital visits and also help them manage their kind of specialist time. So that's a major way that we make money. Another big way we make money is by partnering with pharma companies who are developing new therapies to help them run clinical trials with the same kind of software, but also help them present stronger evidence to the FDA that a therapy is working. So that kind of real world evidence that you might hear about, that's coming from, in aggregate folks that are using our platform. And it's, so you might, for example, you might see something change during a clinical trial, and then we can ask, okay, did that thing that changed in the clinical trial, is that clinically relevant? So when we see that in the real world, is that something that's meaningful to patients, clinicians? Is it associated with like a major change? And that's super important and very valuable to those companies. And then the third thing, which is kind of related, is once a therapy is approved these days, that's not the end of the trial period. These companies have to continue to collect outcomes data to sometimes to keep that regulatory approval, but mostly to support conversations with clinicians, support conversations with insurance companies. Should this drug be covered? What should the price be? Et cetera, et cetera. And so we work with those companies to help generate really, really high quality outcomes evidence, basically, of how the drug is working, how much, for who, for which populations, in which contexts. Yeah, so that's the other big stream.
And on to the end of that, Brian, how have you found the mood among the clinician and neurologist and MDS community in terms of acceptance? Has it been?
Yeah, it varies. So there, you know, like anything, there are, and a lot of them do happen to be in places like the Bay Area. There are neurologists, they tend to be younger, who are all about this, right? And it's more about how they were trained. They're trained to think about Parkinson's this way. They're trained to think about the brain this way. They're trained to think about clinical care this way. And you know, they're sort of our early adopters, or our biggest adopters. You know, movement disorder specialists as a group, I would say, are a fairly conservative group. And so, you know, I think we've had to figure out how to work with those folks and, you know, show them data in a way that, you know, they're very familiar with, basically. But, you know, that's just clinical care, right? Like, especially when you get to specialists in any disease state, the people that are at the top of the field tend to be pretty old, pretty male in this case, and pretty stodgy in set in their ways. So that's another reason why yeah, I think we do put so much focus on really working with patients first, is because that, I think, is how we're going to change this part of healthcare fastest. And then the clinicians will ultimately come along, right? Like, if it's working for patients, we're measuring the outcomes, right? If it's working, the clinicians will come along. And we have enough really, really top tier clinicians who we're partnered with and are working with us that's, you know, that clinical side is not a blocker, right?
Good. We want that to
answer. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ben.
I can answer Jodine's question about if my speech pattern changed after DBS. So it didn't change immediately after, but it has changed in the time since. And yes, I'm on this. I'm actually in the Adapt PD study as well. I was one of the first in that study, though it's not concluded yet, so I can't really talk too much about it at this time. But I have noticed my speech patterns over time have changed a little bit, and they become more of like that monosyllabic that you hear from people who have had DBS for longer than I have. I'm trying to do something about it, but there's only so much you can do. And there's only so much time in the day to actually address this panoply of things we call Parkinson's while also maintaining a somewhat normal life. It's a little bit hard. And then Kevin asked about adaptive DBS and where that is heading. And I'm assuming he means if we're integrating it into Strive PD as well, and how we're integrating adaptive DBS into Strive PD. I'll let Brian answer that second part in a minute, but I found adaptive DBS to be very helpful for me. I think that's the consensus, it seems, from all the patients that I've had the chance to talk to so far, is that they've much preferred the adaptive settings over the continuous settings. However, it's not perfect by any means, and it comes with its own bag of side effects. One particular side effect is that there's certain activities like that require a lot of upper and lower body right-left control, like swimming, for instance, is more difficult than it was before. And this was after we turned on the adaptive settings. So between the continuous and the adaptive, I would say that the adaptive actually hindered my ability to swim more than the continuous did. At least that's what my memory tells me. Um, but so that's just one of the drawbacks of adaptive DBS. But I would say that overall it's been a net positive. However, the thing that's adapting is only one of the parameters that DBS actually modulates, or that DBS can modulate. It's only the amplitude. There's also frequency and the pulse width. I think future versions are going to enable us to actually modulate all three of them, sometimes simultaneously or like as the patient needs. I hope that I hope that's the vision that these companies are working towards. Because while it's better than the continuous DBS, it's still far from perfect. But I'll let Brian answer the question about if we're how and when maybe we're integrating this into Strive PD as well?
Yeah, I mean, we work closely with Medtronic on helping them collect and analyze the data from these trials and these signals. They there was a big conference of the movement disorder specialists about a month ago where they presented the trial results that were pretty taken as pretty positive. I think there were something like 44 people in the trial, and 43 of them blinded chose to stay on adaptive DBS, basically preferred adaptive DBS settings without knowing which one was which. So that's really good. Basically, that's a really good sign that something is working. There's more work to be done there. I know there and there's a lot of it's right now it's a very difficult therapy for clinicians to administer properly. Like it's even more complicated than DBS is to kind of administer. And so I think one of the things that we're hoping to do in partnership with Medtronic and others is to simplify that, automate some of that, so that people that because right now if you know adaptive DBS, maybe there's like 5 or 6 centers in the country that could properly like manage it. And that's great for folks who happen to be in San Francisco or Toronto or New York, but that's not most folks. So we want to make it accessible to thousands and tens of thousands of people. Yeah. There's a couple more questions at the bottom.
Todd, you're muted. I know you're trying to say something, but you're muted right now. Sorry.
Thank you. Brian or Ben, do you know of any plans for Boston Scientific or other manufacturers to go closed loop or adaptive in the future?
My understanding is there's probably plans, but these companies tend to be somewhat low risk. So I think they're waiting to see if Medtronic can make it work, and if it works, then there'll be other folks that are following closely along, I would guess.
And how long has the Percept device been on the market now?
Yeah, the device has a very long history. So Medtronic first started developing the sensing technology in 2012, and the device has been through multiple iterations. This current iteration, the Percept, is the first like big commercial product iteration, and that launched in 2020. Yep.
I should clarify that it's still not commercially available. Only in Japan.
The adaptive isn't, but the sensing is. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay. There's a question from Jodine also that I'd love to ask Brian. I'm happy to answer it as well if you guys want. But what part of the field do you think a cure will come from, and how long do we have to wait until a cure is really here?
So there's 2 areas where we play a lot on the clinical development side. We're involved in a lot of different clinical trials, and we're involved in all of the stem cell trials that are going on, and autologous approaches, autonomous allogenic approaches, all different types. So it does seem Blue Rock, one of our partners that we're working with, just published their phase 1 stem cell trial data, and it looks like pretty good in terms of restoring some function. But I think for something to qualify as a cure, you probably would have to pair that with something which is also like arresting the underlying neurodegeneration processes, of which we still don't totally understand. I think there has been a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of energy and a lot of people that are going to be trying new drugs that are targeting what I refer to as the mitochondrial autophagy pathway. So this is basically like mitochondria and these dopaminergic neurons. They're supposed to, when they die, get eaten up by lysosomes and kind of cleaned out. And sort of what happens in this pathology is in Parkinson's, they don't get cleaned out. They just kind of sit around and gunk up the works until the cell dies. And so this has been identified by multiple different labs as a very likely part of the mechanism that's causing some of the core pathology. And I can think of at least 5 companies that we're working with that are targeting some element of this pathway. Some of them are a little bit further along, like Denali, and some of them are quite early. Several of them are actually based here in the Bay Area. So I know that's like, and a lot of them are supported by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. They've been very interested in funding the science and promoting this pathway. So I don't know if that will be the be all end all, but I think we're pretty hopeful that that's going to be at least part of the part of the key, right? Is to, you know, at least we know that's bad. So stop that, stop these mitochondria from killing cells, and then solve the next problem. You know, I mean, that's the idea.
And I'll just add to that, I think Brian's a little bit more optimistic than I am about anything coming along that will really arrest this degenerative process. I think, as far as I can tell, like in my lifetime, I don't think anything's going to come along anytime soon. Anyway, that's really going to be able to arrest, especially at kind of the more quote unquote advanced stage of this disease where I'm currently at. I mean, I've had this disease now for, I was diagnosed 10 years ago, but I was symptomatic 3 or 4 years before that.
Mhm.
And so to think, and this disease process probably kicked off somewhere like 10 years before my symptoms ever showed up. So like almost 23 years now of this degenerative process. To think that like any one pill or any one elixir is going to come along and really like put a halt to this convoluted path, the convoluted pathways that are really like driving this disease forward. It's tough. It's a bit too big of a pill for me to swallow right now. I'd love to be wrong, but I guess we'll see what happens. There's another question here from Pamela Shear that I'd love to ask Brian as well.
All right.
Do you have similar applications for other diseases? And how did you choose Parkinson's?
Yeah. So I trained as a neuroscientist before I was down at the Google Verily. So I've been working in and around neurodegenerative disease for a long time, and it's really the area of science that I am most interested in and have been for a while. And so I wanted to build a precision medicine company for neurodegeneration, and to solve the kind of business problem. The simple equation I think in healthcare is there are two ways that you can create value. You can help patients a lot, right? And you can help lots of patients. So you can go deep and go wide. And so you want to kind of ideally help a lot of patients a lot, right? So then you can create the most value. And so kind of looking in neurodegeneration, you know, Parkinson's felt like it was an area where we were going to have data and also some of the tools on the therapeutic side to help patients a lot. And there are a lot of Parkinson's patients. And so, you know, that math kind of worked out and made sense. And I think we were able to kind of find some early scientific partners, clinical partners early on. And then the other thing that really has been essential is finding really great partners at the patient level. So we've, you know, both individuals like Ben and also organizations like Parkinson's Foundation, Rocksteady, Davis Finney Foundation, who have just been essential partners to us from the very beginning, and helping to grow the company.
That's great. Hey, let me change gears and go slightly down a different path here for a moment. I know that you both and the extended Strive PD family were in Barcelona in July for the World's Parkinson's Congress.
I was Brian was not, but yeah.
Yeah, I had just had a baby, so I had to miss that one.
Well, then, Ben, this is more for you, but that's fine. I was going to comment that it seems to me that that would be one good example in the MDS conference that you mentioned, Brian, where Strive could unveil some great, you know, aggregated data to start sharing with the world out there. If you can comment on that, it's great. And then, Ben, what did you learn at WPC that you didn't expect or that caught you by surprise, happily or not? Start with that one, and then we'll come back to Brian.
I guess it's just reaffirming, just to see the community again gathering one spot. I mean, it's been 4 years since the last one. It was just really good to see so many people at once, like so many familiar faces. Although it's always a bit of there's always a bit of like some negative as well because you see how far some people have progressed since the last conference, and you mourn the loss of all the people that aren't like with us anymore as well together. But that's what I always get out of those conferences. I mean, it's the ultimate networking event for the Parkinson's community. There's nothing else quite like it in the world. Like having almost 1,000 researchers, 1,000 clinicians, and 1,000 patients all descend on one spot. It's really like the best kind of conference in the world that I've ever seen. And this is not just in Parkinson's, like across. I went to conferences a lot in the past as well. There's never been anything that I've seen that's come close to what to the effect that the WPC has on everyone that comes to wherever it might be. Um, but yeah, that's what I took from that last one. Just reaffirming how the community really is like it's hard to put into words, but it's just a great community. Good, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of, well, I'm glad to be a part of it. Well, I hate being a part of it. I'm glad that the people that are in it are the ones that are in it. If that makes sense.
Totally. I've had that realization a number of different times, and I'm always split when I welcome somebody to the team and say sorry at the same time. But
Exactly.
Brian, that other comment I had was more just a curiosity than begging for an answer. But the whole aggregated data concept.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, maybe I'll email you a couple of posters, Todd, that we presented at the Congress. One around DBS and the other one around more kind of general levodopa management, basically showing some just data about how for smallish, like 13 to 20 cohorts of patients, we've been able to kind of predict when an intervention needs to be made, when a programming change needs to be made, and in which direction, and then show that that works. So they were really well received. Our presenters, our scientists were super busy fielding questions at that conference. But I'll send those posters. They're very sciencey. Yeah, I know some folks here are not afraid of that, so happy to share that, and you can share that with the group.
Great, gladly, thank you.
Yeah.
What else have we got in the Q&A, Bob?
We have a little bit of time. I have a question.
Some good positive feedback, that's for sure. You see any, Monique, that we should pull up?
Let me look. I have one quick question. Something that I know is of interest to me and my partner and probably other people is there's an ongoing debate about, protein and meds and how proteins impact your meds. And I'm wondering if you've seen any data to that effect, if you have people logging in their food intake and their meds and their symptoms, if you've seen any correlations around the protein question.
Yeah, no, it's actually, so the woman I mentioned who designed the app, Aura, that was the first thing that she herself tried to look at in the app, and it's something that she continues to use it for, to try and kind of dial in as her kind of disease evolves. And now Aura's recently had DBS, so her kind of whole symptomology just kind of reset. So now she's refiguring stuff out, but the protein really affects her a lot, and it's very evident. She can see it immediately when she eats a high protein meal around these doses. The symptoms behave completely differently than they do when she doesn't, and it's super evident. I know for other people the patterns aren't as strong, but that's one of the again, that's why this personalized approach is so important. So you can kind of track it, and I think the thing that Aura has managed to solve for is she's figured out kind of how many hours she needs to give herself on either side of things to have a high protein meal. And that's great. I think one of the things that we're trying to get to is where we can kind of help by doing some of this forecasting in advance, help kind of predict, okay, can I eat a high protein meal, or is that going to put me into an off state, basically? So yeah, no, I happen to be very close to that particular one because I'm very close with Aura, and she's a huge advocate for this, and something that she talks about with her patient support group in Santa Cruz a lot. So I know it's something that folks are able to use Stripe PD for.
Great. Jodine had a point, since the UPDRS has come up at least a couple times. This is just a sidebar comment she's got, that folks should check out Dr. Lori Mishley's Pro PD tracker, pro-pd.org. So if you don't know about that one, attendees, then check that out.
My goal is that no one should ever have to fill out a 40-question survey.
Yes, that's what Stripe PD should do.
Right? We'll automatically create the picture, the 40-question survey. Hopefully we don't need too many of those.
But Joe, it seems like you'll always have to have some manual data input, right? In terms of you can't just have the medication or the diet automatically fed into the data stream, right? You have to manually input that.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends. Like I said, it depends on the pattern that you want to track, right? So if you're trying to optimize meds, it's really helpful to track meds, so we have a better picture of that. Even though just having symptoms and knowing your baseline medication schedule, that actually gets us most of the way there, assuming that you're like being fairly compliant with meds and mostly taking them on schedule. Like there's a lot of folks who like that actually is enough information to kind of work with their clinician to optimize. And yeah, depending on how optimized you want to be, like going to the next step and actually logging them will kind of help us get you closer. Yeah.
Are there plans for Strive to work on other devices other than the Apple?
Basically no is the answer. So it is really expensive to develop high quality software that's reliable. And, you know, we've spent a lot of money and effort and time and testing and regulatory stuff to get it approved for iOS and the Apple Watch. So, you know, we're still a pretty small company. We're 50 people. Most of those about half of those are software engineers, but there's a lot of software and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make sure this is all reliable, compliant, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we'll see. Who knows 2 or 3 years from now, but probably not in the next 12 months, I would say.
Okay, fair enough.
If we want, I have like a final kind of more philosophy question for Brian.
Oh my
I don't know
gosh.
if we're there yet, though.
Fire away.
All right. I'm just kind of curious because from what I can tell, Rune Labs is not only like a great resource for Parkinson's. In my opinion, what you've assembled is actually the best like database in the world about the brain and the human experience. And I'm kind of like curious what else you've learned about just that you've taken to your own life, maybe, or that has informed your own sense of who you are as a person based on everything you've learned about like the DB. It could be from adaptive DBS or from the Apple Watch data or anything in between about how it's affected your outlook on the human experience.
Yeah, actually, there was something that you told me. I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe. So we were talking about like how I'm pretty sure this was you. You're talking about the difference between how you experienced like adaptive DBS versus continuous DBS. And you described it as the different like adaptive DBS for you was like being in a high quality like automatic car that was just like shifting along with you versus like continuous DBS was like you were sort of always kind of not quite in the right gear. And anyway, I thought that was like really, really interesting. And you know, just kind of got me thinking about, you know, I don't know, my like especially having a young kid, like I'm constantly kind of out of sync right now. Like, you know, I'm not sleeping, this and that, and kind of thinking about the things which put me in more of that like automatic driving mode, like exercise for me versus things which, you know, kind of leave me in that other mode. And then I wear the Apple Watch and use Stride PD every day, and I look at my own data as well. And, you know, I can see like, especially in my mobility metrics, like when I'm going through periods of like severe sleep deprivation or stress or whatever, like kind of it shows up and is, you know, I think it's, for me, it's like more of a self-awareness exercise to kind of be aware of like, oh yeah, I am sleep deprived, I am stressed. But yeah, I've come back to that comment that you made a few times. I thought that was really interesting.
Great. Okay. Well, listen, I think we have maxed out on questions here, unless I'm missing any. Monique, do you see any? No, I don't see any others. From those of us with micrographia, thank you. Amen to that. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Are there any final thoughts, Brian, from you or from Ben?
No, just thanks everybody for sharing your Saturday morning with me and Ben. And really, like, yeah, don't be a stranger. You know, we're super close with a lot of patient communities and clinician communities in the Bay Area. So, like I said, you know, we're lucky to be in one of the parts of the U.S. that has, you know, top quality Parkinson's care, top quality Parkinson's research. So if sort of something you're not happy about with your care, please reach out through the Stripe PD website, reach out to me, and you know, we'll see what we can do to help.
Great.
I just want to say thank you to Todd, Monique, and Kathy as well for putting together PD Active. Because at the end of the day, I mean, there's only so much that companies like Strive, like Rune Labs can do to help people. You need a local network and you need local support from people with Parkinson's as well. And so thank you all for all that you do to help the local communities in your
Yeah,
areas.
absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Well, on behalf of Monique and Kathy and PD Actives, to all of our attendees, lots of good questions, lots of good banter and fun engagement through the Q&A tool there today. And gentlemen, thank you both again for sharing some of your family Saturday with us. We appreciate it immensely.
Yeah.
We will put this out on our YouTube channel, folks, so it may not get there till Tuesday-ish or thereabouts, but we will also be sending out an email to all registrants for this event so that they can see some of the links that were in chat and that link to our YouTube channel. We frequently get a lot of folks logging in there to see that couldn't make it to even register or registered and couldn't join at the last minute. So I expect a lot of good engagement there. But otherwise, thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Yep, you too.
Bye
Bye
now.
now.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye, thanks.